You can see on the panel that I'm joined, and I'll more formally introduce Chris Kyle and Jenna French a little bit later for a few remarks before we open this up to hear from you. I have a presentation on Virginia, on the blueprint process, and some good news to share with you about how Virginia is doing in our rankings, but also some of the economic challenges that Virginia is facing. And we also have a regional perspective as well to share with you. Because we're the state chamber, I'm coming to you from an office, formerly ICF's headquarters in Virginia, down in Southeast Virginia. Scott Trainum, the principal of this company, came from the Shenandoah Valley in Stanton, and he told me to give greetings. He built a significant company and sold it to an international group recently, and I'm fortunate to have members of the chamber around the state that allow me to stop in and they host me when I'm doing these meetings. So he is especially fond of Stanton and that region, but a local accountant that grew up and went to school and has done very well in Virginia. But thank you all for being here. I want to officially welcome you to the Blueprint Virginia 2030 regional meeting. We are excited to be in Region 8, which is the GO Virginia Region 8. Chris chairs. I want to thank our partners before I begin. They include our partners at Department of Housing Community Development, Eric Johnson and Sarah Dunnigan. I also want to thank the Virginia Economic Developers Association, and I'll introduce Jenna French in a minute for a few remarks, and obviously Connie Long, who coordinates that important group. We have some state chambers other than the Virginia Chamber on the line that have also co-hosted this with me. The Hispanic Chamber, Virginia Hispanic Chamber, participating, Michelle Jajour, and also the Virginia Asian Chamber is participating. And I want to thank Mylan Tran, and we have been closely aligned with other chambers throughout. I want to also include the Lexington-Rockingham Chamber. I want to thank Tracy Lyons and Top of Virginia Regional Chamber, Cynthia Schneider, and the Greater Augusta Chamber, Courtney Thompson, Luray-Page Chamber, Jenna Hillard, and the Shenandoah County Chamber, Sharon Barceloni. I also, of course, want to welcome Chris Quinn, the Regional Chamber there in Harrisonburg-Rockingham County, and thank him and welcome him new to the chamber world for me, and our partnership is growing. And also Chris Swecker from the Highland County Chamber. We also have some of our Blueprint leadership on the call, Susan Horn from Lead Virginia and John Arena from our steering committee at Huntington Ingalls, and Liz Povar on my advisory committee, the Riverlink. And then a number of other people that I will recognize a little bit later. I'll hope to recognize, and maybe if he's available, John Alger, the president of JMU later. But I want to thank Dr. John Downey, the president of Blue Ridge Community College, for his good work. And also, I want to say that the executive director of the Virginia Foundation for Community College and Education, Jennifer Gentry, is on. So we have some superintendents on as well. And also we have from ICF, a partner in promoting internships. And someone, Chris, I want to connect you to in promoting internships is ICF. I want to thank William Trumbull and Bridget Brown for being on as well. All these individuals working closely with us to develop the best regional plans that we can. So let me ask Laura on our team to share the slide. I'll go through a brief PowerPoint and look forward to hearing your comments. If you have questions about my PowerPoint or comments, please put them in the chat feature, or you can actually ask questions in the Q&A feature. And again, exciting to welcome almost 200 of you to this process. Next slide, please, Laura. So just as a reminder for us as the voice of business for the Virginia Chamber, we are in fact committed to being an influential advocacy organization, but in order for us to advocate, we have to know your views of the world. And we do that by having a bottom-up process with Blueprint Virginia. Next slide. And also as a reminder, our mission is to be a leading nonpartisan advocacy organization. So someone asked me the other day who I was endorsing in the gubernatorial election. I said, I'm endorsing ideas. The Virginia Chamber doesn't endorse candidates, we endorse ideas, and we will put forward those ideas in our blueprint to the next governor, and look forward to working with you to have your fingerprints on the blueprint as we develop it this year. Next slide. Our membership continues to grow, and thanks to our alliance membership, you can see throughout the Commonwealth, every dot represents 25 chamber members. We're almost to 28,000 members. Truly the voice of business, because we can reach businesses across the Commonwealth and we can speak on their behalf. Next slide. Simply stated, our goal is to make sure we strengthen Virginia's reputation as the best state in which to do business. We want your region to be the best region to do business. And I'm pleased that last week we were able to receive this recognition from CNBC as the top state for business, still #1 for business in this survey, which is a highly coveted survey that we've been able to win 2 consecutive scoring years in a row. Next slide. We've also had recognition by Wallet Hub as best public schools in the South, and we've also been recognized by Smart Asset as the 2nd best for higher education, and that was in 2020. I'm very pleased to tell you that yesterday, Virginia, in the 17th ranking of business facilities, was ranked best business climate, #1. We were #2 last year, #1 this year. We're also #1 for tech talent pipeline. A lot of that's because our institutions of higher education, and #1 for cybersecurity. This is literally breaking news that came out last night, Chris. I sent you and the board members a note on this regard. So very good news for us. It doesn't mean we don't have areas to work on, but we want to celebrate our successes as a Commonwealth. We ranked 5th most innovative state in a recent Wallet Hub ranking. We also are very proud of the fact that we were just ranked by Wallet Hub the #1 state for military retirees. Another big celebration for us as a Commonwealth. Doesn't mean we don't have challenges, but we definitely want to celebrate our successes. Next slide. We also have room to work in the area of equality. While we were 7th best in the latest US News ranking, we were 5th in the nation in equality and opportunity to improve in this area is an area we're going to focus in Blueprint Virginia 2030. We want to be the best in everything, right? I thought you would appreciate the fact that you and your region have really contributed to the data center strength of the Commonwealth. We have more data centers in the Commonwealth per capita than any other state in the country. This is just a quick visual of where they're located, and obviously your region has its share of these as well. Next slide. And of course, we have a lot of technology companies, and your region contributes to this as well. And this is just a quick visual of how Virginia has become such a strong state for technology and cybersecurity. And the next slide will show a strength of your region, and that is a large and diverse distribution and logistics ecosystem. Without question, the inland port contributed to this. It was a dream at one time when I was a local mayor in Newport News, and they were talking about a port up in Front Royal. And then as Secretary of Commerce, I got to see some of this become reality. And it has truly been an asset to the Shenandoah Valley, but to the Commonwealth and to our country. Next slide. So the economic development announcements that have occurred in your region are quite impressive. And you all know where your region is. This is Chris, you chair this region and work with these counties that are listed here, and we're so glad so many of them and their chambers are participating today. The next slide will just remind you of your population, a little over 500,000 and around 40,000 in annual wages, and then some of the targeted industries Chris will probably cover when you have a chance to speak in just a moment. Next slide. But we captured this just for the purposes of revisiting some of your successes. And if you look at this chart in 2019 of the company names, the localities, the type of company, and whether it was existing or expanding, you have so much to be proud of and a lot of momentum in your region. And I want to thank each of you for what you're doing to build the momentum and the business climate of your region. very significant. Next slide will show you another list for 2020, and then we did a quick recap for you coming up in the next slide. So, so far this year, you've obviously had some announcements, one in Rockingham as well. But this is the recap, over $1 billion of investment in 3 years, and almost close to $2 billion. And it's also good to see the amount of existing businesses expanding. That means they're not leaving the state. That means they're staying where they are, and they're businesses that feel appreciated. And of course, attracting new businesses is also important as well. So congratulations to everyone on this call for what you're doing to contribute to the economic prosperity of your region. Next slide. So our blueprint process is an important one. Let me explain the way we've used these blueprints in the past. For the last 2 gubernatorial elections, we've spent a year developing the blueprint, and we present it to the governor-elect after the election at our economic summit within 2 to 3 weeks. Doesn't mean we're not talking to candidates. We actually are talking to the policy teams and the candidates right now about our survey process. And we brief them after Labor Day, but the winning gubernatorial candidate gets to come in at our summit in front of about 1,000 business leaders and receive the blueprint and give a response to the business community. Next slide. This is a picture of us presenting this Blueprint Virginia 2025 to our current governor, Ralph Northam. I was pleased to see his priorities with yesterday as he announced the support for Unemployment Insurance Trust Fund. And we've been working diligently with this administration to continue to improve the business climate of Virginia. And all of our goals and objectives are in the blueprint as a result of about 95 business organizations and over 6,000 individual company representatives being involved in developing the blueprint. Next slide. So these are the initial competitive focus areas. I will tell you we have polling taking place in each one. And in a moment, when I close my presentation, I'm going to ask Nicole to give you an update on the polling results that your region has provided us so far. But these 9 areas are areas that we focus on for each region and then statewide to ensure we're capturing your regional priorities and also to make sure we're capturing the statewide themes of competitiveness for Virginia. Next slide. As I mentioned, our national rankings at one time we fell out of the top 10. And a lot of that was due to sequestration and the clampdown on defense spending, but some of it was inherently due to some policy areas that were not priorities, such as investments in higher education and workforce training and the like. As a result of the blueprint, we've seen our rankings continue to climb, and we think we're in an inflection point where continuing to advocate for pro-business friendly principles and policies will make a difference over the next 5 to 10 years. Next slide. Some of the economic challenges, as I mentioned earlier, I'll cover quickly. Obviously, we are coming out of the deepest, fastest recession that we've ever been in. The gold line is how we got in and out of the 90 recession. The green line is the same for the 2008 financial recession. And you can see how much time it took to slowly go down and slowly build back up the nation's economy. But this red line represents the pandemic that caused our economic crisis and how we are quickly recovering as steeply as we fell off. Next slide. We know the hardest hit areas were in leisure and hospitality nationwide, and we obviously have great concerns about that. And this is a sign of where industries were hit the most difficult. Next slide. This is the Virginia view of what industries were most challenged. The hardest hit area was leisure and hospitality in Virginia, but also non-essential retail. When people say, well, retail is struggling, well, actually grocery stores did very well and home improvement stores did very well. The non-essential retail, the local shops are the ones, in fact, over 30% of our small businesses went out of business last year, and we need to build them back. Next slide. So tourism and hospitality, I'm so glad that we're going to hear about that in your area in a few minutes. But this was what we have picked up from our analysis. More than 45% of the jobs lost were in this area. significant drop in travel and tourism from 19 or 20 to from 19, and significant revenue loss. As a result, we've seen a staffing shortage. We see an increase in pressure on hiring and wages. Next slide. We've seen Virginia come back, but we're not quite back to where we were with our unemployment rate in February of, this is the statewide, February 20, we were at 2.5% unemployment. Next slide. And then of course, we know that not all regions were hit. So Virginia has seen progress in our recovery of jobs, but not all regions have recovered at the same level and the same speed. So this is comparing February to April. Now I know we're trying to update this for our May, June numbers, July, but the unemployment rate in the darker areas were in the 8% range, and the lighter areas in the 2% range. So actually your region fared better than much of the state when it came to the loss of these leisure and hospitality jobs. Next slide. So how is Virginia doing comparing to the nation? Well, we've actually improved and we've consistently done better. I think this is largely because of our knowledge-based economy and the number of essential workers that have been able to continue to stay employed. Next slide. We asked VEDP to do some projections. When will Virginia get back to the job levels that we had before the recession? Their estimates would be early in 2022. If you look at the urban crescent versus the rural horseshoe, you'll see that the urban crescent will actually get back a little bit sooner than the rural horseshoe initiative and area of the Commonwealth. Next slide will also show you that the economic shock disproportionately impacted less educated, minorities, women, and lower wage workers. Why is this important to pull the curtain back on this? Because as we think about updating our blueprint, we want to be inclusive and we want to be representative of all people from all walks of life with all education levels and all industries and all regions. So let's make sure we're starting with the right data. Next slide will show you that the unemployment rate for various population groups within the Commonwealth, including those with disabilities, has been significantly higher than other population groups. Now, again, this is February to February of the last previous year. And obviously, we want to make sure we're leaning in on recommendations that are inclusive as we develop our Blueprint 2030 recommendations. Next slide. So we put forward last year, and we're building on this, a momentum around equality of opportunity. Each of these recommendations are all available online, and we are advocating that we use this as a starting point and a platform for Blueprint Virginia 2030. Recommendations around closing the education gap by bringing everybody up, closing the employment gap, providing more financial opportunities, and the entrepreneurship gap by ensuring that there's opportunity for everyone to start and grow a business. And we've recommended some criminal justice reform, so not to arbitrarily keep people out of the stream of workforce and commerce. You can see this in more detail if you want to go on our website. Next slide. So the Blueprint Virginia process is one that we're pleased has included so many different organizations, including GO Virginia, and in all the economic development organizations and the universities and the school systems. Next slide. Our steering committee is led by Nasik Keene, the CEO of SAIC, and Ed Bain, the president of Dominion Energy Virginia. Next slide. Again, this wheel represents all the steps we're taking to develop the blueprint, including the steering committee, executive committees within public policy, regional meetings, the boxes around it, because that's what we're doing today with you. All over the state, we're hosting these. And then our signature events and some of the strategic partners that we have. Their recommendations will all be approved by our advisory committee, steering committee, and our board later in the fall. The Road to Progress kicked off last December. We're having our executive committee and steering committee meetings all spring and summer, with our final board review in the fall. And again, December 3rd, we hope to present the release of the Virginia Blueprint 2030 plan. Thank you for allowing us to be here today. We have had over 4,000 participants in our blueprint process so far, and you all are a big, important part of that process. Next slide. And again, and mark your calendar for December 3rd. We actually are going to do this in person, barring any significant announcements from our health experts in Richmond at the Convention Center, and unveil the blueprint and hopefully present it to the governor-elect. Again, the org chart simply shows you there is a steering committee and advisory committee, but it's intended to be a bottom-up process with the left-hand side focusing on specific policy areas that you can look at, and the right-hand side making sure we capture the regional perspective with our partners in economic development and GO Virginia and other associations. Next slide. I do want to acknowledge these companies. You'll see these logos. Each of them have made an investment in the blueprint process and have signed on to be stakeholders. And I want to thank each of them for their support. Next slide. So let me ask Nicole to come back on and talk to you a little bit about the process and share with you the results of the survey so far. And then I'll introduce Chris for a few minutes. Nicole?
Hello, everybody, and thank you again for joining us today. I'm going to go through this as quickly as possible. A few things that I want to note. These are just the preliminary results. So if you haven't had a chance to participate in the survey yet, it's certainly not too late. We want to ensure that we get as many voices in this process as possible. I actually just put the link in the chat, so feel free to follow that link and participate in the survey as we go or after. And also, please send this to anyone else within the region that you believe would be interested in participating. So these are just the preliminary results. So if you participated as of about 10 o'clock this morning, your thoughts are included in this. So let's go to the next slide. So as Barry mentioned, we are doing a multi-tier approach to our surveying. We also have a statewide survey that's on our website. That's actually going to close on Friday. So if you haven't had an opportunity to participate in that survey, we would love for you to do so. And I'll ask a member of our team to drop the link to that in the chat as well. But today we're just going to focus on the Region 8 survey. So next slide. So the first question was, Virginia's economy is headed in the right direction. You'll see that more than half of participants said they either agree or strongly disagree, but we want to get that number up even higher. Next slide. Virginia is doing a good job preparing the workforce that business needs. Now, as we're going through this survey and we're asking in all of the regions, this is actually one of the more interesting questions because you'll see that not more than half agree or strongly agree. This means that this is a significant area that we need to work on, not only statewide, but as regional approaches, as we understand that there isn't a one-size-fits-all model for each region. And that's why we really hope to collaborate with you all to ensure that we're developing regional approaches as well as statewide. Next slide. Virginia has an environment that encourages entrepreneurs and businesses to innovate. This is usually the highest percentage we see over agree and strongly agree. But again, as Barry mentioned, even though that we've been recognized for this, there's still much more work to be done. Next slide. Which areas do you believe have the most impact on Virginia's overall economic competitiveness? If you participate in the survey, you'll notice that we had about 15 different areas of focus, policy areas to select from in every region that we've been in so far, as well as when we did this surveying in 2017. The number one answer across all regions is workforce and education, that access to talent, ensuring that we're supporting our workforce of future through early childhood, all the way through the higher education system. So while we are very strong in this area, as Barry mentioned, there's still much more work to be done. In each of the regions, you'll see business climate and innovation and technology competing for that number 2 spot. In this region, Region 8, we saw number 2 or as the business climate and number 3, innovation and technology. It's been consistent in regions that it's either one or the other. And then a tie for number 4 was housing and transportation. Next slide. If Virginia could make additional investments in education and workforce development programs, where should the investments go? Again, across every region, number 1 answer, internships, apprenticeships, and other work-based learning opportunities. Number 2 was community colleges, and number 3 was K through 12. I will note, just as I said in the last question, community colleges and K through 12 have been fighting for the number 2 spot, depending on which region we've been in, but community colleges and K through 12 have been in the top 3 for every region. Next slide. Where do you think Virginia should be concentrating its infrastructure investments across all regions? Number one, broadband. Number two was transportation. And then a tie for number three was water/sewer and school maintenance. Next slide. What is the most important component of healthcare to businesses and their workforce? Number one, affordability and total cost of care. And then a tie for number two is accessibility and quality of care. Next slide. What is your greatest priority regarding energy? There was a tie for number one, affordability and reliability. And number two is decarbonization. Next slide. What is the best way for Virginia to increase the number of advanced manufacturers in the Commonwealth? Number one, across all regions, build the workforce of the future. Two was increase the number of business-ready sites for development. And three, invest in research and development to grow these opportunities organically. Next slide. What approach would be most effective for the state to take to support sustainability efforts and encourage environmental stewardship? Number one, again, across all regions, improve public infrastructure and lead by example. Number two, financial incentives. And number three, increase regulatory enforcement. Next slide. What is Region 8's greatest barrier to affordable and quality housing? Number one was low inventory, two, zoning restrictions, and three, population density. Next slide. What is the greatest area of improvement for preparing for the next pandemic? Again, the number one answer, consistent across all regions, early detection and mitigation through our public health infrastructure. Next slide. Which of these tools would be most helpful for your business to encourage hiring veterans as they transition out of the military? This is a new question that we added as we developed the Blueprint Virginia 2030 process. And the number one answer was standard definition of military skill sets that translate directly to civilian industries. And then a tie for number two and three was career assistance and veteran mentoring services. Next slide. For Region 8, what is the most important potential infrastructure investment in your region? Number one, increase broadband infrastructure for unserved areas. It should say unserved areas. Number two, interstate highway and freight rail improvements. And number three, additional business-ready sites. Next slide. For Region 8, what's the most important industry for continued growth? Number one was light manufacturing, two, food and beverage manufacturing, and three, IT and communications. I believe that should be the last one. As Barry mentioned, we hope you'll join us December 3rd for the Virginia Economic Summit in Richmond as we present the final document to the governor-elect. We hope you'll participate in the statewide survey that we've dropped the link to. And if you haven't participated in the Region 8 survey, it's not too late. Please participate and get engaged in this process. We appreciate you all participating today. And with that, I'll turn it back to Barry.
Thank you, Nicole. Let me recognize Chris Kyle. Many of you know Chris in his business capacity and local corporate citizenship. I know Chris as a member of my board and as a member of the State Chamber Board, the Executive Committee. He does chair the GO Virginia Region 8. I thanked him. I wanted to ask him if he would make a presentation on behalf of GO Virginia Region 8. He also is the Vice President for Shenandoah Telecommunications. And Chris, thank you for being here. Thanks for your leadership of the GO Virginia region. And I'd like to recognize you to make some remarks on this regional meeting.
Great. Thank you, Barry. It is great to be here. It's great to talk about economic development here this afternoon. I just wanted to say that December 3rd meeting was one of the best meetings in Virginia pre-COVID. So hopefully we can get that, it holds and we can have that back this year. You covered a great background on GO Virginia Region 8. I'm appreciative to have a few minutes to talk about the work that we've been doing, Barry. And I think a lot of this, it's important to dovetail with the work you're doing. And so it's a very important time. We clearly want your feedback. I don't have any slides today. I'm going to lay out some important details, but what we do have is what we call our old growth and diversification plan, which again, that's one of the things that will be updated kind of in conjunction with the Virginia Chamber's work. And we're happy to email that out to people. And we would like to do that after this call. But again, Barry, let me just talk for a minute about our region. It's an incredibly large and diverse region in terms of geographic miles. On the northern side, Frederick County, on the southern side, Rockbridge County, and we have Interstate 81 that runs the span of it. You said this, we've got about 540,000 people living in our area. And anyone that's been up and down I-81 understands the vast economic and demographic diversity we've got in our region. I also want to take a minute here and just talk about the regional collaboration we've got here, because we do think that's a unique asset, and it's important for Go Virginia. We have a variety of support organizations that would include the Northern Shenandoah Valley Planning District, the Central Shenandoah Valley Planning District, the Shenandoah Valley Partnership. And in fact, Ashley Schickel, who's our Go Virginia program coordinator, splits her time between Go Virginia and the Northern Shenandoah Valley Partnership. So through our work, this alignment work that Go Virginia was designed to do to align private business, private industry with our municipal stakeholders, we have just built on or furthered the collaboration that already existed here. And the trains, let me say it, the trains wouldn't run on time if this wasn't in place. And so I think that's been a very good thing for Go Virginia, and we're grateful of the foundation that was already here in our region with that. So let's talk just for a minute about in detail to start to get into the detail here about our regional economy. What do we do well? What are our strengths? Well, healthcare, that was on one of the slides previously. Logistics and transportation, another one that you profiled, Barry. But I just want to say, don't think just interstate or don't think port. We've got an aviation, a growing aviation industry here. We've got agriculture, clearly, and it extends far beyond poultry. We've got light manufacturing, and in our world, or in this classification, we think pharmaceuticals, snack foods. Barry, you talked Hershey chocolates. That's always a fun tour to take of that plant. We've got plastics, and we've got many others in our light manufacturing category. And we've also got an incredibly strong educational system, both primary and secondary schools. James Madison University, Shenandoah University, Blue Ridge Community College, Lord Fairfax Community College, and many more. I'm grateful for the presidents of many of these institutions who serve and providing valuable leadership on our Go Virginia board. And it speaks to this alignment that Go Virginia has brought together. So there's a lot of strengths to build upon. And as we look at those and we look at the opportunities that we have in front of us, talent development is at the top of the list. We want to continue to support our existing businesses with talent development. Some of our Go Virginia grants that we have already provided, and I'll just call a few of these out if you have time to go look at them. The Shihada Innovation Center in the Winchester area. It is an amazing project worth further investigation. The Rockbridge Area Advanced Manufacturing Project in the Lexington area that is training welders. Blue Ridge Community College launched a cybersecurity program that has had significant success already. But what I want to say about this, but no means is this the full environment. There is much more to come here. And that was part of the feedback that Nicole was sharing. There's a lot more we need to and will do. The second area of opportunity I want to touch on, and I'll just touch on briefly, has to do with sites, available sites, commercial, pad-ready sites for business expansion. Later in this presentation, I didn't get a chance to talk to Jay Langston before, but maybe we could get a few comments from him on this. But I think if Stephen Murray were on the call, Barry, he might actually jump in here and take part of this meeting over. But I'll suffice it to say that we share and support his vision on this topic, and there's a lot more in our region that needs to happen. The third area I talk about is just a general improvement in our overall entrepreneurial ecosystem. We want to make it easier to start businesses. We also want to make it easier for innovation and commercialization. We've got a couple of interesting things happening there. One I'd like to talk about is the Stanton Community Foundation has created through a grant from Go Virginia, Startup Shenandoah Valley. So we're all trying to figure this out, but what is clear is we don't have a pipeline of intellectual property coming out as other regions do, but we do have everything else here. And so how do we put these pieces together to create a more vibrant startup community? And there's good work happening there. One interesting example that we also funded was the Common Grain Alliance grant. So how do we help our local farmers, especially farmers on the smaller end, get their product to a market, help them find the market, help with logistics, bringing these different stakeholders together. And Ashley Schickel worked very hard on this grant. So another topic is, that we look at is, what regions are high growth potential in our area, or what industry sectors. And so, as I said earlier, and as part of this work that Barry is doing with the Virginia Chamber, we're going to go through a process to update this, what we call our growth and diversification plan. If you want to be included in that process, absolutely. I'm so grateful for today. There's going to be some ongoing focus groups that Ashley Schickel is organizing, and we'd love to include you in some of those. But the industry sectors that we targeted last time we did this include the following, and there's 7 of them: financial and business services, healthcare, information technology, and communications. We saw broadband. Barry talked about data centers. A lot happening here in our region. I think COVID it only pushed more remote work out here to our region, and there's a huge potential for that. The 4th area is light manufacturing, transportation and logistics. I talked about aviation. Barry talked about the port. We certainly have a very large interstate-based transportation logistics network here. Biomedical and biotechnical category is another important one. And the last one, but not least, is value-added food manufacturing. We talked Hershey's earlier. So while we've got the 7 industry sectors discussed here, we also want to provide focus for this creation of higher paying jobs for the region. And so within that, there are 4 themes that we're concentrating our efforts to support these industry sectors. We want to recruit and retain the talent, the workforce that we need in this region. We want to grow existing businesses and develop existing clusters, or scale-ups, as we call them, to help with this. We want to establish more business startups, the entrepreneurial ecosystem that I talked about a minute ago. And then we also want to continue to look at potential joint economic development activities, such as site development or training initiatives to support all of these. So yeah, I feel like I'm talking a lot here. I hope this is helpful, but maybe I'll close with, what do we think coming out of COVID is important for Go Virginia? And maybe this tees up, the next part of the conversation, but clearly there's more work to be done on available sites for business expansion. There's more work to be done on workforce training and availability, and understanding, differences in wages and a balanced workforce here. There's more work to be done with supporting and continuing to develop our entrepreneurial ecosystem, and then clearly interstate and other transportation and infrastructure projects, broadband, etc. Clearly, there's a lot of work to be done with that here. So, I'll close with thank you for your time here. I hope this is, sparked some interest, some additional conversation. Barry, I'm grateful for the slides that you put up early, and I'll turn it back over to Nicole.
Thank you so much, Chris, for the overview of Region 8 and how you all are envisioning your future. And that's what we value as we go around the state and put together a statewide document to ensure we are including in this the priorities of each of the regions. Many of them do overlap, but not all of them. So this was very insightful, so thank you. And I'm getting ready to recognize a representative of the Virginia Economic Developers Association. And after that, we're going to have open discussion. I hope to be able to call on some of you that are on the call, and recognized a couple of you already. But I also want to thank from Dabney, Lancaster Community College, Joe Rainoni for joining us. I know the superintendent, Chip Jones from Cumberland, and Paul Nichols from Mecklenburg. I'm not calling you out to speak, but just letting you know if you decide you want to add something, let Nicole know in the chat, and we'll be calling on people in just a couple of minutes. So With no further ado, Jennifer, thank you for joining us. And I know you're on vacation because you mentioned the kids were behind you playing, and thanks for joining us. It shows your commitment to economic development and to your region. For those of you who don't know, she has a long track record and has been very involved in this region. She has been involved as well in economic development. She's been involved in tourism, and recently the county brought those together and now leads that organization. She also is here today wearing her hat with the Virginia Economic Developers Association, another co-host of ours. And then I want to turn it over to you to say a few words to representing the economic developers. And I know you're on the board of that organization. So let me recognize you, and then I'll go to open comments. Thank you for being here, Jenna.
Yeah, thank you so much, and good afternoon. On behalf of VEDA, we're really appreciative of you allowing us to be a part of this discussion. So I'm happy to be with you today as we think about Blueprint Virginia and the future of business in the Shenandoah Valley and across the entire Commonwealth. As you know, VEDA is a strong voice for shaping economic development public policy here in Virginia. We strive to be a leading source of effective education and networking for economic development professionals. Now more than ever, economic development is truly everyone's business. Looking back over the past year or so and at our shared experience with the pandemic, I think we can all agree it's critical that we do everything in our power to get all Virginians back to work and invigorate the Commonwealth's economy. At VEDA, our public policy platform aligns with that objective. Specifically, we recommend policy and budgetary actions in 3 main areas of focus. First is having a skilled and available workforce, as is evident through the survey results that you shared with us again today. We're convinced that the future of Virginia's economic development success is the attraction, retention, and development of workforce and talent. VEDA supports the Virginia Jobs Investment Program, also known as VJIP, and the Virginia Talent Accelerator Program. These are 2 complementary programs that provide economic development projects with critical workforce training support. VEDA is also in favor of additional funding to build on the success of the Workforce Credential Grant, also known as Fast Forward, which is a pay-for-performance initiative that creates and sustains a supply of credentialed workers to fill occupations where demand outstrips supply. And right now, that's quite a few occupations. The second major public policy focus area is promoting economic prosperity for all regions of Virginia, including the Shenandoah Valley. To be competitive, we must have fast, reliable ways to move people, goods, energy, and information to every corner of the Commonwealth. VEDA supports increased funding for the Virginia Business Ready Sites program and other efforts to prepare viable sites for businesses looking to locate or expand in Virginia. As you heard again from Chris and also from the survey, this is a major priority and a hurdle right now, quite frankly, throughout the Commonwealth, and not having enough sites available and ready. Minimizing the time and mitigating the risks of the path to market make all the difference in today's fast-moving and highly competitive environment. VEDA also supports funding the Virginia Telecommunications Initiative, as well as maintaining funds for GO Virginia. Finally, the third major public policy focus area is developing tools for competitiveness. We must strengthen and grow our economic development toolbox through existing incentives, sound tax policies, the state's marketing program, and support for programs that revitalize communities. As we continue to make strides in those policy-related areas and consider priorities for Blueprint Virginia, we're confident Virginia can lead the nation and consistently rank as the best state for business. They said 2 years couldn't be done, but we'll see if we can make it 3. Thank you guys all for your time, and look forward to working together with everybody to show how resilient Virginia's economy can be when we all work together. Thank you.
Thank you, and thanks to VEDA for the partnership. We want to open the floor, open the virtual platform for participants today. I do want to recognize my friend John Alger first. President Alger knows that I'm very fond of JMU. My wife and I met there 41 years ago when we were in undergrad. My 2 daughters graduated from JMU. And on a personal note too, I was fortunate to be on the board of visitors when we hired John Alger. And John started as president in July of 2012. And thank you, John, for your leadership and for your partnership with the business community. I'd like to recognize you, and then others will be recognized as well. So John, welcome, and you have the floor.
Thank you, Barry. It's great to be with you, and we really appreciate your statewide leadership and your understanding about how higher ed connects with the business community. That's been a real strength here in Virginia. So just a couple of words of greetings on behalf of JMU and higher ed, and then some quick thoughts on the role that we can play. First of all, when you think about higher ed, we shouldn't forget that we are, of course, represented on the Region 8 Council, as Chris mentioned. We actually like to work together in Region 8, and that's been a real advantage that we have. There are several of us as presidents who serve as active members of the council. JMU, as many of you know, is actually the largest employer in our region and a major economic engine, as are the other institutions of higher education. We have a new Economic Development Council that some of you are already familiar with, led by Melissa Lubin, and you'll be hearing more about their work to support businesses with recovery and resilience coming out of this pandemic. And we're very excited about the fact that here at JMU, we were ranked #1 in Virginia for getting a job among all universities for the past 2 years based on US Department of Education data. So we take these responsibilities very seriously. You know, Chris mentioned that this is one of the strengths actually in Region 8, that the educational institutions that we have. And I think it's important to acknowledge that we see our role not as being an isolated ivory tower, but quite the opposite, to be focused on engagement with our communities and with businesses. We've already mentioned things like internships. I think of collaborations like the one we have with Merck and Blue Ridge Community College to build a pipeline of talent to meet the emerging needs of their workforce. That's the kind of way in which we want to continue to work together with all of you. And to do that, to prepare that future workforce, we've got to be in constant communication with one another. And I think that's where events like today, the work that we're doing with the council really help so that we can anticipate what are those needs of the future and how do we help to meet those needs. And we're, of course, preparing students not just for that first job out of college, but we have to keep looking ahead to what are the needs 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now. One thing I would mention is that the students here, one of our great strengths is they love the Valley, and many of them would love to stay here. So as we diversify our economy and build more jobs, we've got a lot of students who are going to be well-trained that would love to be here. Many of our institutions really concentrate on skill sets that help a lot of employers, regardless of academic major. So we're looking at things like communications, critical thinking, problem solving, innovation, teamwork, information and data literacy, and resilience. These are skill sets that we hear from employers that can be useful across many different sectors. So we are that source of diverse human capital, which I think is the most important resource that we have, is that brain power. But let's also not forget that we're sources of expertise. Chris mentioned entrepreneurship. We have a Center for Entrepreneurship, as do other institutions in our region. And that is another tremendous source, is the brain power of the faculty who want to work and engage with our business community. Lifelong learning. One of the big changes in higher ed is that it's not just about 2- and 4-year degrees anymore, but we are trying to work with the business community to provide education and support for individuals at all ages and stages of life and in their career. So that means more in-demand adult education, digital credentials, certificate programs, short courses to meet those needs and demands as they emerge. And finally, I'd note that we want to be partners with all of you in attracting businesses to our region, and we can have a major impact on that quality of life. And that's what helps to draw businesses and helps to draw people here to our region. So we're really excited to work with all of you and to roll up our sleeves, and glad to be a part of the conversation.
Thank you so much, President Alger. Thank you for your leadership and your collaboration with the region and for the partnership between business and higher education. I want to commend you on connecting learning to earning and JMU's recognition in that regard as well. We do have, Nicole, some other people that have asked to speak. Jay Langston, the Executive Director of the Shenandoah Valley Partnership. Are we able to recognize him for a few minutes?
Yes, absolutely. So Jay, you've been promoted to a panelist, and thank you again, President Alger. We hope you'll stick around. The next question is actually going to be around higher ed. So Jay, whenever you're ready, thank you so much for participating.
Oh, it's a pleasure, Barry. Thank you very much. And I do not have prepared comments, so I will make this brief, but I appreciate the opportunity. Chris Kyle is a very, very busy individual because not only is he the chair of Region 8, but he's also the chair of the Shenandoah Valley Partnership. And to President Alger's points too, SVP is an affiliated sponsored program with JMU. So we are very fortunate to have resources in this region. I will say that the survey results that Nicole did such a great job of telling us about really resonates with us. Number one and number two are sites and workforce. And much of it goes for the workforce side of the quality of life that President Alger was talking about, which is something that we're working on. When I accepted this position up here, Chris was part of that process as my chair and our executive committee. Sites was a top priority, and that is a critical function for us. I think I can channel Stephen Murray fairly well at this point, but for a regional group and a rural region that is growing, it is critical for us. And I mention this simply because it's not about attraction as it is as much about the existing business growth. And Barry, you mentioned that when you looked at our announcements over the last 3 years, a significant portion of that are major expansions from our existing businesses. So we are very cognizant of the fact that we need to be prepared in the marketplace. This is being addressed in our diversification plan for Region 8. It is certainly part of the strategy for our local economic developers and us regionally. And we're very excited about the partnerships that we have within the region with the university network, the colleges, the community colleges, and our CTE programs as well. All of it is part of what makes us viable and provides the assets for us to be successful long-term.
Yeah, you did well not to have prepared remarks. Thank you so much. And thanks for the alignment. I think we're going to have John Renoni for just a brief comments, and then we're going to have a question on higher ed. So John and President Alger can both stay on. So Nicole, if you can recognize.
Yes, President Renoni, you are a panelist, so you are welcome to turn your camera on, and thank you so much for being with us.
Great. Thank you so much. Can you see and hear me?
Yes.
I see some. Okay. Yes, thank you so much. This is John Renoni, president at Dabney Lancaster Community College, and I had the pleasure of being on your call, Barry, in Region 2 because we cover both Region 2 and Region 8, and we're kind of in that donut hole between the two regions. But the one thing I really wanted to mention, and of course, workforce is the topic of the century, certainly. And Jenna, you mentioned about Fast Forward, and I know Dr. Downey is also on the call as well, but Fast Forward is our fastest it is certainly our fastest growing programs at most of our community colleges across the state, because individuals can really start working in a career in weeks versus months and years. And the one thing I just wanted to share regarding expanding of that training is Dabney is really excited to be expanding our presence in the Rockbridge area. We have acquired the old Ford dealership in Buena Vista, and we will be turning that into a workforce center where we will be running all the programs that we have on the main campus in Clifton Forge in Rockbridge, and welding and diesel mechanic and building trades. And all of them will be addressing, all the programs offered will be the Fast Forward programs, because that's a part of our service area that we've had a presence there for over 25 years, but just have never had the opportunity to run the heavy trades programs. We run culinary and nursing, but this is an opportunity for welding and diesel mechanic and machining and so forth. And I just really wanted to share that with your audience is, the hope is that we can, the pandemic slowed us down a little bit, as you can imagine.
Yeah.
But the hope is that our presence will be expanded by the end of next year. So I know there's a number of businesses on the call, and we, and as well as Blue Ridge being so close, are certainly ready to serve the business industry and continue to serve the business industry.
Yeah, thank you so much. Stay on as a panelist. And Nicole, do you have a question, or are we going to? Okay.
Yes, so we actually have a couple of questions. I'm going to do my best to hybrid them all, so bear with me here. But at a very high level, what can we be doing to better connect our community colleges and state institutions to business to ensure that we're keeping our students in the state upon graduation? And then more specifically, in terms of closing the gap between urban and rural areas of Virginia, are there any strategies that community colleges and state universities need to address, particularly in industries, well-paying jobs and future industries such as drones, 3D printing, and other industries? So very high level, what can we be doing on the connectivity side? And then more granularly, what can we be doing to support closing the gap between urban and rural areas of Virginia through our higher education institutions?
President Alger, I'll put you on the spot first, and then John, I'll come to you. President
Sure.
Alger.
Okay, well, a couple of quick responses. I think, first of all, when we think about what employers want and what they need, and then what the students need, internships is a great sort of bridge, right? They give students real world experience. They make them more ready for the workforce. They connect them to local employers, and it makes it more likely that those students are then going to work ultimately at those types of businesses. And so that's one area I would really encourage all of us to think about, is more ways to provide that kind of hands-on experience, whether that's during the summers or during the academic year. And you mentioned, thinking about the urban-rural divide. It's one of the challenges we face, being a more rural region compared to some of the others in Virginia. But we learned during the pandemic that we can use virtual technology, right, to connect people. So you can have students engaging in internships or working with people that aren't necessarily in the same room with them. And I think that's something that we really ought to be thinking more about and exploring, is how to use the technology to connect people when they can't physically always be in the same place. The last example I'll give of creative ways we can work together, and specifically with the community colleges, I think John Downey is with us today, but just yesterday, John and I, or earlier this week, had a press conference, and we talked about this new bridge program between Blue Ridge and JMU, where students that would be on our wait list that weren't quite ready to jump in and be successful at JMU, but were on the wait list, would be offered an opportunity to live on our campus their first year, to get involved with student organizations, interact with other people on our campus, get all sorts of student support services and advising, but they would be taking that first year of classes at Blue Ridge. And after they complete a certain number of credits at a certain GPA, they would be guaranteed then to slide right in to a degree program at JMU. So that's a creative example of something we'd love to expand further. And I think there are ways like that we can work together to build that pipeline, and in ways that hopefully will keep some of these students in our region.
Thank you so much for that comment. I will commend you for that physical partnership. It will make a material difference in the lives of students. I did, just because it was a higher ed question, President Rainoni, do you want to chime in on that? Okay.
I really don't have much more. The only piece that I do want to say, I completely agree with President Alger's comments, is that the needing to talk about these careers in middle school and elementary school is critical. Because there are still high school juniors and seniors that don't know that there are great jobs and careers in our region that are right here, that they don't have to go somewhere else to learn about drones, to learn about manufacturing of those types of things. So it really needs, the message has to get clearer, and the parents have to also be involved in that discussion as well.
One of the benefits that you all may not realize of these exchanges today is that our policy team is capturing, of course, these examples, but they're also scalable. If we really have the best in class practice going on between a community college and a business or a university and a community college, we want them to be scalable for all of Virginia. But thank you for sharing these. They're very important. I'm going to recognize Nicole again to see if we have another question or another speaker.
So we, and Cynthia Schneider, we are going to call on you next. We actually have Dr. John Downey, a Blue Ridge Community College president who's been promoted, who I believe may want to react to this question as well.
President Downey, are you there?
Yes, thank you, Barry.
Yeah, good to see you.
I think the data you presented earlier is fascinating to me, that we haven't fully recovered in the Valley yet, all the jobs we lost pre-pandemic. And yet, when John and I go around to various employers, we hear incessantly that they can't find the talent. So I think it goes beyond an issue of misalignment, because I think in most of the programs that are offered at the university level and at the community college level, our students are getting jobs. So the challenge really has to be, what is the workforce issue? And we really need to drill down and define it better than we have, I believe. And that one of the workforce issues is, do we have enough bodies in the areas where the jobs are? And what happens if there's a misalignment of jobs to people in different regions? Can we do something creative about that? I think that's an issue that's a little bit more challenging to tackle, but an important one from a Virginia Chamber perspective.
Yeah, just an observation about that, because it's statewide, it's actually nationwide. We have job openings that aren't getting filled, but yet we have people not going to work. The national journals that I read on that, President Downey and others, say there are really three reasons why people aren't going back to work right now. Because if you look at the labor force participation rate, that's much lower than it has been. And so we know people aren't back in the stream of work. The three main reasons, one is there's still people concerned about the virus. I mean, there's even those who may be vaccinated are concerned about the virus. How much a percentage of that is, I'm not sure. The second, and we haven't talked about it today, but it's come up in every other region, and I'm curious if anyone wants to chime in on this, is childcare. Not having available childcare and or schools in session. But childcare itself is paralyzing a percentage of our workforce by not having available childcare. And what can we do about that regionally? And I'm talking about childcare that could also be early childhood education, because hand in hand, we're hearing that around the state. And then the third, which I think will be resolved from a policy perspective, is just people waiting to get back in the stream after their enhanced unemployment dollars come to an end. And I think we're beginning to see some of them come back into the workforce, because September 4th, that sunsets. So again, there may be other reasons, but I think we have to solve the child care issue. And combining that with early childhood is a recommendation we're going to definitely put in the blueprint. And then obviously we've got to solve the healthcare crisis and continue to promote vaccines. But thank you for making that observation. I think it's contributing to the reasons we don't have all the workers back that we hope to have back. The last thing I will say is we should consider, and I've heard this in other regions, we should consider a talent attraction campaign. You know, we have campaigns around expanding business and relocating businesses and bringing new business, but the quality of life in the Commonwealth, and of course I can say in the Valley because I've experienced it for years of my life, the quality of life, a talent campaign, there are only a couple of states that have done that well, but I think it's something we should consider as a state, and I hope will find its way into the blueprint, because we're a great place to live, and if you can work remotely, it'll be a great place to work. Nicole, I know we're bumping up. We're going to try to continue this to 1:15, 1:20. We're trying to honor the lunch hour, but Nicole, do we have someone else?
Yes, absolutely. So the CEO of the Top of Virginia Regional Chamber and one of our partners in the region, Cynthia Schneider, you have been promoted as a panelist, so we'd welcome you to address our attendees. And then we've got a couple of questions that we're going to try and get through to all of our panelists. And Tracy Lyons, you're going to be next.
Great, great. please promote Cindy Schneider on?
Hi, I am. Thank you.
Oh, hi,
for the
welcome.
Opportunity to share. What I would like to bring to the table is the concept that we need a cultural mind shift, that all workers are essential and all work is honorable. And this has to begin with parents. I am that parent. 15 years ago, I had my third child who wanted to take a career and technical route in his education, and I balked. And it took me over a year to come to terms with that concept. And I'm really sad to see that 15 years later, we are still really fighting that battle of helping parents and guardians guide their children into career and technical paths, or maybe even not highly technical, but what type of work they will enjoy and that will be meaningful to them. And so I think that's an overall cultural mindset that we can help to steer, because we can have a lot of career and technical education programs, and if our parents won't allow their children to take that route, they will be for naught. So that's something we're working on here at the top of Virginia Regional Chamber, is a campaign to promote that concept that all work is honorable, all workers are essential.
A worthy campaign. Thanks for sharing. Thanks for joining us today and for the recommendation. Nicole, who do we have next?
Yes, so I just promoted Tracy Lyons, and while she is jumping on, I want to ask a question I think everybody can react to. We've got a couple of questions on this, so I'm going to merge them all together for everybody to take in the way that they'd like. But as we were just talking about, we've got a couple of questions about, can we talk about the emerging careers in the Shenandoah Valley, and are our institutions working with business to ensure that our students are being prepared to go into these emerging fields within the region?
What's the question? I'm sorry, Nicole, it broke up just a little bit, so I didn't hear it.
So sorry. So the question at a very high level is, can we talk about what the emerging careers in the Shenandoah Valley are? And then furthermore, are we doing well as a community to ensure that businesses and higher education institutions are working together to ensure that our students are prepared for these fields to stay within the region after they graduate?
Yeah, I think I'm going to put Jay and Kyle on the spot. Since Chris, you chair the region and you're Jay's boss, I'll call on you first and then Jay to fill in. So Chris, Kyle, can you respond to that?
Yeah, well, as a sidestep, Jay is working on a grant around this topic here, and that's what I was going to ask him to kind of tee it up, and then we can jump in.
Jay, emerging careers, demand careers, how do you respond to the question?
We are very fortunate that we have a private sector led initiative, Barry. I'm sure that will be music to your ears, but businesses are engaging in educating the community, younger adults, middle schoolers, and their parents, I think, which is equally important, about career path opportunities. I will call out their name. Dynamic Aviation has a fabulous program called Next Gen Aviators. And while it is focused on aviation, many of the aspects of the STEM nature related jobs translate to many of our businesses in the Valley, and they are working now with other businesses in the Valley. So while it is a model that has started and it's nearly a year old now, this is something that we would like to expand upon. It's working, it is getting into the school systems, it's educating the population about these opportunities, and it is that dialogue directly from businesses to their workforce, both now and the future. So we're very excited that the business sector is stepping up and improving upon that. And why bother to create something new with something that's already working?
Yeah, thanks so much for answering that question. Tracy, thank you for being here. Want to recognize you. Thanks for your partnership with the State Chamber as well. Tracy Lyons, floor is yours.
Good morning, Barry. Thank you. We appreciate the opportunity for this listening tour. I think it's really important for our region, and we appreciate all of your attention today. One of the things that we were talking about, and I wanted to mention and just touch on briefly, a couple years ago, the governor did a workforce listening tour, and it was really, we loved just having him here. One of the things that was really mentioned then that we haven't heard much about was this focusing the K-12 on the career coaches, and knowing that our counselors are so overwhelmed that they're not even having the opportunity to meet with students and talk to them about truly career paths and what that means for them, and matching their needs and their talents to where they should go. Instead of maybe a four-year college, it could be more hands-on. And they're so overwhelmed with just, SOLs and everything else and everyday needs, and especially for our community, keeping students in school. There's been a big push for trying to meet that 89th percentile graduation rate, and that means just getting them to the classroom. And so our counselors are the ones that are tasked with that. And if they weren't tasked with that opportunity, that they could be doing careers. And so maybe there could be some more focus on getting career coaches in the high school so that they can just focus on that career. And I know Dabney, our partners, our local community college has done that, and they're helping with that. But I think across the board at the state level, that focus, I feel like, will help tremendously get in front of the students, because no matter how much we help and we try to partner, we only hit a small percentage of the students versus it being across the board needed.
Thanks for your leadership of the chamber in that area and for your partnership with the education community. Well said, well stated, and we've noted it. A friend of all of ours, the former Secretary of Education, Jim Dyke, who I've worked with in a number of ways. Jim is on our advisory board. I think Jim is on the call. I'd like to recognize Jim if he's available and promote him. Nicole?
Yes, so I think Jim is having some technical issues. So
Okay.
Jim, if you would like to come back on, just let us know. And while we are seeing if he joins or not, we have a couple of questions. And again, we're gonna just hybrid as best. Oh, this might actually, yep, okay, here we go. So Jim, I'm promoting you as a panelist now. And while you are transitioning over to a panelist, I want to ask a question because I'm sure you're the man to answer it. So someone had asked that in growing population areas, talent development and closing the education gaps in K through 12 and pre-K will be somewhat dependent on the education facilities and infrastructure of the region. A challenge is the particular tax burden that capital projects can create on businesses and residents. And it becomes a larger challenge as municipalities try to duct tape the needs to hold off the larger price tags. So what approaches and partnerships can we explore to support greater support for early childhood education and K through 12?
Okay, well, I will try to be brief. As you can see, I'm actually in my car, but I wanted to join in to say a couple of points. One, you had someone mention earlier the CTE program, and I wanted to make sure that Barry noted that I think a couple of years ago, he and I both spoke to the Virginia Association of Career Technical Educators, and we made that very same point, that we really do need to emphasize CTE and to promote parents early on to understand what the opportunities are for their young people, and that we need to do more in that area. And I know that's going to be part of the blueprint. As far as infrastructure is concerned, you are absolutely correct. We have too many facilities that are too old, that need to be replaced or rehab or updated. I was glad to see the governor just a few days ago announce plans to help update some of our facilities in order to make for a better learning environment. But I think we need to get creative in the business community to support ways to make sure that our facilities, school facilities, reflect the fact that they have to be more compatible for technology these days. And so without going on, I know you're running out of time. I think that that's an issue that we ought to address. And also, on a personal note, congratulations to Jonathan for the great year that JMU's girls softball team had. You made us all very proud. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Jim. Thanks for joining us. I know you're on the go. Let me ask Nicole, I think we might be able to have time for one more question to honor people's schedule today and wrap up by 1:20. I do want to thank all our panelists for staying on and for their comments, and for those who put comments. If you've put a comment in or a fact in the chat, we are capturing that. Our policy team is Also going to ask you to send any data to our policy team that you can send it to our attention, and we want to make sure we have the studies that go along with it. And Nicole, do we have time for an additional question today before we move towards closing?
Yes, so we have time for one more question. I do want to mention that if we didn't have time to address your question, we'll ensure that our policy team or the appropriate point of contact gets back to you directly with the response to your question. So if you have more questions, feel free to put them in. We'll ensure that you get a response. And as Barry said, following this, we hope you'll reach out to our team. I will put our contact information in the chat with any policy recommendations, observations, or anything in between you believe could be valuable to developing Blueprint 2030. And what better way to finish than talking about housing? So someone had asked, housing is critical for economic growth and is one of the barriers for businesses to obtain employees. How can GO Virginia, the chambers, and other partners in general be a partner to address this shortage of workforce / affordable housing availability within the region?
Yeah, it's a great question. Many years ago, and Chris, I'll come to you to see if GO Virginia has chatted about this or anyone else, but many years ago, I heard this slogan that, homes are where jobs go to spend the night, right? So if you don't have the right housing mix, you don't have the right workforce mix. So some of the regions are mentioning this as an economic competitiveness issue. Chris, I'll call on you or Jay or someone else. Has this been discussed, and what are some of the observations of your region with regard to housing?
I'd say it's probably it has been discussed, but it's probably a topic that gets weaved into our next, iteration of the growth and diversification plan, because it's not going away. We have different regions across our footprint that have, different challenges with this. But in any of our, more densely populated areas, it's a big deal. But it's also an opportunity potentially, for us to leverage some of our, outlying areas potentially. So more to come on that. The headline is we're just not talking. Everybody's talking about this issue right now, but we've got to drive it to some form of action, and that has not happened yet.
Good observation. Any of the other panelists want to comment on housing? If you do, just unmute and speak up. I'm not going to put you on the spot. I do want to say that this is a statewide trend, and it's actually a national trend. So it's something that we are looking at, including in our blueprint. We've created a housing subcommittee. If any of you have an interest in that, please email us. We've got some state experts on housing that are going to make some recommendations about housing when it comes to public policy. We are Dillon Rule State. It's very local government driven, but I think some guidance and recommendations for private and public partnerships will be very helpful for Virginia as we think about housing as an economic development factor. I know our partners at the Realtors Association and our partnership with the VHDA, Virginia Housing Development Authority, Department of Housing Community Development, all of them are very connected to it. But good question. And with 1 minute left, I think it's probably my responsibility to close this out. But Chris, thank you. And Jenna, thank you. And presidents of colleges and universities, thank you. And our local chamber partners and everyone who just was online and sending in questions. It's been a robust discussion today. We've taken notes. We have a sense of your regional strategic plan. We want to continue to be your voice to public policymakers statewide. But we're only as strong as our partnerships are with you in the regional level. So thank you for what you're doing to make this region a great place to live and work. And thanks for your partnership. Feel free to reach out to us over the course of the coming weeks if you have additional ideas. Again, we hope to wrap up our recommendations in October to our board and present them to the governor-elect in December 3rd. So thanks to everybody. Hope you have a great rest of the summer. And thanks for participating. We'll stand adjourned.
Thank you.
Bye.